A thin layer of dust blanketed the counters and shelves of the old clockmaker's workshop, but no amount of disarray could dim the gentle glow of its proprietor. He was a music box repairman first and foremost, a man who held quiet reverence for each spindle, gear, and tune that crossed his workbench. His name was Oliver, and on an ordinary spring afternoon, he looked up from polishing a brass cylinder to find a figure standing at the threshold of the shop. Illuminated by the sunlight out on the cobblestone street, she appeared almost ethereal, an aspiring ballerina named Clara. She was drawn in by the lilting melody that Oliver had been testing on a partially repaired music box. The memory of that song tugged at her heart. It reminded her of lazy Sunday nights in her grandmother's parlor, when the old woman would wind up her cherished music box before bedtime. When Clara stepped into the workshop, her delicate ballet slippers created a gentle patter on the time-worn floor. Every movement of her limbs was measured and graceful, as though the dance never truly left her body, even when she wasn't on stage. Oliver's attention shifted from the brass gear in his hand to the slender silhouette wavering in the sunbeams. Her voice carried a sweet timbre as she inquired about repairing a music box of her own, a small silver piece engraved with the figure of a tiny ballerina poised on point. It had belonged to Clara's mother, she explained, but it no longer played a sound. The mechanical dancer within had become stuck, and the gear that once spun the figurine had corroded. Oliver studied the piece carefully, taking in the intricacies of the design. He saw how the little metal dancer's arms had once twirled elegantly in time with the music, now stiff from disuse. He could feel Clara's anxiety, the way she clasped her hands together as she spoke. That particular music box held more meaning for her than simply a device that played tunes. It was an heirloom, a promise, perhaps, of the dancer she strove to become. Oliver promised to do everything he could. He swung open a drawer, fishing out a small magnifying glass with which he examined the rusted inside. The challenge she had presented him was precisely the kind of puzzle he loved. Music boxes possessed an unmistakable capacity to conjure nostalgia and comfort, the memories embedded in those tiny rotating gears unlocking precious emotions. To see a beautiful piece still cherished and held dear signaled that his devotion to this craft was justified, and Clara he could sense her sincerity. Something in those clear eyes, something about the way her voice hovered between hope and doubt, entranced him. In return for his services, Clara offered to show Oliver a few of her ballet movements. Embarrassed at first, he insisted she owed him nothing but safekeeping of the music box. Yet a secret longing she awakened compelled him to accept. She led him out to the small courtyard behind his shop. The courtyard was lodged between leaning stone walls topped with climbing ivy, and though the space was narrow, it was enough for her delicate spins and graceful leaps. He noticed how her slender arms cut through the air in a fluid arc, how her slippered feet scarcely made a sound against the ground. Her dancing had an effortless joy, like a current that carried the onlooker into a realm of serenity. She performed an extended pirouette, balancing in a whirlwind of movement, leaving Oliver breathless at her precision. From that day onward, Clara made a daily pilgrimage to the workshop. She would linger by a corner of the counter while Oliver patiently adjusted the tiny gears, or she would venture to the courtyard and maintain her rigorous practice routine in the hush of afternoon light. Though self-conscious of her presence, Oliver enjoyed telling her about the intricacies of his craft. He showed her the minuscule pins on the cylinder that made the music come alive, the steel comb that vibrated to create each individual note. She would watch with rapt fascination, occasionally stopping her own dance warm-ups to look over his shoulder. He sensed her excitement at each new discovery, the air between them charged by a sort of unspoken admiration. Late one evening, long after the shoppers had closed their windows for the night, Clara returned to the workshop unexpectedly. In her hands, she held a small paper box. With a timid smile, she explained it was homemade shortbread, fresh from her friend's bakery. She insisted Oliver take a break from his repairs and have a sweet treat. He found himself delighted by the gesture. It felt homely and tender, like sharing a secret. They sat side by side on an old wooden bench near his station, the paper box open, the shortbread balanced between their fingers. The workshop lamp cast soft dancing shadows on their faces. Over the gentle hum of the night, Oliver confessed his childhood fascination with tinkering, how he had learned to fix watches and music boxes from an old traveling craftsman who wandered into his town back when he was barely tall enough to see over the work table. In return, Clara confided the struggles of her ballet training, the countless hours she spent perfecting each position and posture. She shared how she once performed in a local recital and had nearly fallen mid pirouette, but somehow found her balance at the last possible moment. She described the applause that followed, how it had felt like a wave of warmth and validation. Now, as she prepared for an audition at a more prestigious studio, each day piled on new pressure. But something about the workshop's quiet rhythm soothed her. She found space to breathe amid the whirring gears and lightly chiming parts. It felt like a place where perfection wasn't demanded, but patience was recognized as its own form of grace. As the days passed, Oliver drew nearer to completing the repair on her music box. Each gear was now polished to a soft gleam, poised to spin in harmony. All that remained was to retune the steel comb so the notes matched their original scale. Yet Oliver hesitated to finalize his work, not because he didn't trust his technique, but because he knew that once the box was fully repaired, Clara might no longer need to frequent his shop. A quiet longing blossomed in him. He worried that if he fixed her treasure too quickly, he'd lose the constant presence of her companionship. At the same time, he yearned to see her face when she heard the melody play once again, a reward for his devotion, a testament to her mother's memory. Eventually, the day came when Oliver placed the last gear back into position. He carefully wound the key, mindful of the torque so as not to strip the newly fitted mechanism. Clara stood beside him, nearly quivering with anticipation. The moment he let go of the key, the silver dancer began to rotate. Her tiny and point stance restored, the comb's pins plucked out a familiar tune. It was gentle and haunting, a lullaby that wrapped the listener in its tender layers. As soon as Clara heard it, tears gathered in her eyes. The sound was more than a simple melody. It was a journey back to her mother's arms, to her earliest days of twirling in nightgowns, imagining an audience of angels and stars. In that moment, she reached for Oliver's hand and clasped it, an unspoken gratitude passing between them. Heartful, Clara began to dance alongside the music box's melancholic tune. In the cramped workshop, she spun in graceful circles, the chiffon of her skirt swirling about her. Oliver stood frozen, enthralled by the sight of her melding her passion with the relic of her loved one's memory. There was no grand stage, no sea of spectators waiting to applaud, only Oliver, the flickering lamplight, and the whir of gears. Yet to Clara, it felt more profound than any performance she had ever given. When the melody ended, she collapsed softly into Oliver's arms, both of them overcome with emotion. He gently lifted her back onto her feet, silently acknowledging the bond that the repaired box had forged between them. That evening, Clara lingered longer than usual, the music box secured in her bag. She paced around the workshop, as though bracing herself to say something. When Oliver finally walked her to the door, she asked if she could return the next day, not to have anything repaired, but to dance in the courtyard under the sun. Oliver's answer was a bright smile that said yes without hesitation. There, in the hush of the starlit street, they shared a hesitant embrace. The notes of the music box still echoed in both their minds. Over the next few weeks, Clara continued to refine her audition piece. Though the music box was repaired, she found that Oliver's workshop had become a sanctuary amid the frantic pace of her daily rehearsals. The courtyard still provided her with just enough space to rehearse her leaps in private. Oliver would set aside his current project, come stand by the threshold and watch her. Her slender figure cut through the shafts of sunlight and embodied melody that complemented the gentle ticking and chiming sounds from the workshop. Whenever she struggled with a particular move, Oliver offered gentle words of encouragement, even though he was no expert in dance. Instead, he spoke of patience, perseverance, and how every gear must be calibrated with time and care to function together as a whole. Clara's final audition day arrived. She was determined to perform with absolute precision. She had labored over each arabesque and pirouette until she knew them instinctively. Yet her heart always fluttered at the memory of dancing in Oliver's courtyard. Stepping onto the polished wooden floor of the studio, she took a breath. Time seemed to slow as she began her routine. Each shift of weight, every bend of her arms, it was as if she carried Oliver's gentle guidance along with her mother's legacy. When the music ended, she bowed, her chest rising and falling with the exertion. The panel of instructors appeared intrigued, and though they gave no immediate feedback, Clara sensed that something inside them recognized her artistry. She stopped by the workshop afterward, adrenaline still coursing through her. Oliver set aside a watch he was mending and greeted her with an expectant look. She listed every detail: how many people were there, how her nerves felt when she first took the stage, how she nearly lost her balance, but remembered his calm counsel. So she converged all her strength into that single pivot. Though the instructors didn't provide their verdict on the spot, she walked away confident that her best had been shown. Oliver offered her his signature look of pride, the subdued delight that lit his eyes. Even so, a momentary ache pricked his heart. If Clara was accepted into a prestigious program, would she remain in town? Days passed with no word from the audition. A hush of suspense fell round them, though neither Clara nor Oliver spoke openly of their apprehension. The turning of the workshop's gears and the clock hands on the walls seemed to measure each quiet hour with extra weight. Clara held her breath whenever the postman passed by the workshop window. Oliver tried to keep her spirits high by inviting her to dance in the courtyard during the mild evenings. Their conversations lingered on tastes of the future, half-formed hopes about traveling. He told her of a dream to one day craft his own line of specialty music boxes, each uniquely tuned, each telling its own story in sound. Clara confided that if she succeeded in this audition, she planned to eventually bring joy to smaller communities, hosting recitals and allowing children to experience the magic of ballet. On the morning that Clara finally received the letter, she nearly tripped over the threshold of the workshop in her rush to find Oliver. She tore open the envelope on his counter while he peered over her shoulder. The studio had accepted her, with scholarship accolades and a place in their advanced company. The letter's words sparkled with promise. Her dream was finally within reach. An indescribable joy lit up her face, an effervescent glow that spread to Oliver. In that instant, her entire journey flashed through each of their minds. Her mother's music box, the courtyard dancing, the careful calibration of gears. Clara laughed, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. She threw her arms around Oliver in a spontaneous embrace. His heart pounded in response, yet a flicker of sadness tugged at both of them. The new studio was in the city, a day's journey from their quaint town. If Clara accepted, it meant she would relocate almost immediately for the season's intensive preparations. They faced the new reality with wavering optimism. Should she chase her dream or remain anchored in the comfort of what they had fostered? The question lingered unasked, weaving tension into their newly budding romance. Late that evening, under the flicker of an old lamp, Oliver took her hands in his. He offered his unwavering support, telling her that an opportunity like this was too extraordinary to pass up. If fate allowed their stories to interlace again, he said, it would happen in time. The next day, Clara packed her essentials: her ballet shoes, her practice skirts, and of course, her mother's restored music box. Before she departed, she visited the workshop at dawn. The sky streaked with pale pinks and oranges. She found Oliver cleaning up scraps of metal and polishing a newly repaired cylinder. In the calm hush of the morning, She admitted that leaving behind the security of their bond frightened her. Oliver, in turn, placed a small package in her hand, a tiny silver gear he had shaped into a pendant. He'd fashioned it from leftover pieces used in her mother's music box repair. It was a token, he said, so she would carry their shared rhythm with her. Despite the nervousness, she seized him in a final, ardent hug. Their lips met in a kiss that was as delicate and enchanting as her pirouettes, as warm as the lullaby that had rekindled her memory. It was goodbye for an uncertain duration, but a deeply felt one. Oliver accompanied her as far as the edge of the town, watching her figure recede along the winding road. The pendant glinted briefly in the morning light, reminding him that her presence, though physically leaving, was forever intertwined with his world. Weeks turned into months. Clara immersed herself in the rigorous schedule at the new studio. Hours each day were spent mastering choreography, technique, and performance. The city bustle was exhilarating but relentless. She missed the serenity of the courtyard, the soothing tick of the workshop's clocks, and Oliver's gentleness. Her mother's music box became a nightly ritual. She wound it up every evening, letting its melody fill her small apartment. Hearing it reminded her of a place where time ran by softer measures, where she could replenish her spirit in the hush of turning gears and kind eyes. On difficult days, she clutched the gear pendants around her neck, imagining Oliver's patience and quiet strength guiding her. Meanwhile, Oliver kept running the workshop, though he felt Clara's absence keenly. Each time he heard the scuff of dance shoes on the street or caught the quiet hum of a tune that sounded reminiscent of her music box, his heart constricted. Still, he had his craft to keep him centered. Customers came and went, bringing battered old pieces for him to restore. And each time he tinkered with a stubborn gear, he recalled the way Clara understood that patience was the cornerstone of creation, whether it was a skillful pirouette or the perfect alignment of metal pins. Months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Oliver returned from a short errand to find a small envelope slipped beneath his shop door. His heart stammered at the sight of familiar flowing handwriting. Inside was an invitation to a ballet performance, Clara's first lead role, scheduled for the following month. She had scrawled a personal note at the bottom. "I would be honored to have you in the audience. It was your faith in me that made this possible." Oliver carefully set aside his current project, already wondering how he might close the workshop for a few days to attend. He felt a surge of boundless pride. Regardless of the distance, he resolved to be there. The night of the performance arrived at the Grand City Theater, its entrance crowded with attendees dressed in finery. Oliver found a seat in the middle rows, clutching the program in slightly trembling hands. The lights dimmed and a hush fell over the crowd as the curtains parted. Clara appeared, radiant in the glow of the spotlight, her movements merging artistry and precision. The hush of the watchers broke into appreciative awe when she bridged delicate footwork with dynamic leaps. Her expression reflected a quiet determination, a joyous gratitude for each moment of wonder she was creating. Oliver noticed a shimmer around her neck under the stage lights. It was the little gear pendant. When the final movement concluded and Clara landed in a graceful pose to thunderous applause, Oliver felt the sting of tears at the corners of his eyes. He could almost hear the quiet hum of her mother's music box in his mind, a private soundtrack to the triumphant spectacle before him. After the production, he made his way backstage, where dancers clustered in congratulatory embraces. Claire's eyes found him across the crowd, and she bounded over, breathless and elated, costume tools still fluttering around her frame. Their reunion was a quiet exchange of smiles amid the swirling excitement. In the hidden alcove behind the busy stage, she clasped his hand, leading him away from the chaos. Their bond felt just as strong as before, perhaps even more profound because they had pursued their separate paths with unwavering hearts. Clara took Oliver to the rehearsal studio down the hallway, away from prying eyes. There, amid mirrored walls and polished floors, she turned on a small speaker. A gentle melody filled the space, not unlike the one from her mother's music box. She took Oliver's hand, guiding him in a slow, improvised dance. Oliver shifted with apprehension at first, never having learned formal dance steps. But Clara's presence steadied him. They glided on the smooth surface, hearts beating in unison. In an unspoken dialogue, each movement seemed to say, "We've changed, but the essence of who we are, of what ties us together, is constant." When the music ended, he pulled from his pocket a tiny key. It was fashioned from brass, a sister piece to the gear pendant. He held it in his palm, the overhead lights glinting off its polished edges. He explained that it was part of his newest creation, a special music box he'd been designing in secret. Though still in progress, he'd chosen a theme that captured their shared story, a dancer figure that would spin not mechanically, but bathed in a swirl of starlight reflecting from the box's interior mirrors. He wanted her to see it once it was complete, to perhaps choose the melody it would play. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, for in his words, she recognized a promise of continuity. For a long moment, they stood in the hush of the studio. Oliver reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from Clara's face. Their foreheads leaned together, and she whispered her gratitude that he had been there when she needed the music box fixed, that he had fueled her confidence to dance freely, and that he had kept a place for her in his heart, despite the distances, both literal and emotional. Oliver replied softly that he had gained something equal in return, the realization of how love could inherit the gentle resilience of a finely tuned gear. Time and obstacles might impose friction, but with care and devotion, they would turn in harmony. Leaving the theater that evening, they walked side by side through the bustling city streets. Their future was not entirely clear. Clara's career might lead her to distant stages, while Oliver's workshop would beckon in the nostalgic corners of his modest town. But there was a quiet certainty inside them both now, a knowledge that some relationships transcend distance, that gentle devotion and shared dreams could keep them linked. Their footsteps pivoted into an unhurried waltz of possibilities, an unscripted dance of affection and hope, and the faint music echoing in their thoughts reminded them that sometimes the most memorable performances in life unfold not in grand auditoriums, but in the silent spaces of the heart, where delicate gears and pirouettes align to form something timeless.